Rumors had been spreading for weeks in Milan about a hidden army, an invisible line of men, weapons, and instructions kept for a war nobody wanted to talk about. It was 1969, and the city still smelled of smoke from a bomb that would become a fulcrum in modern Italy's history, the Piazza Fontana explosion that killed 17 and shattered trust in state institutions. To understand how a democratic country found itself haunted by secret battalions, you must go back to the end of World War II. Western intelligence services, fearful that Soviet advances could swallow Europe, set up clandestine stay-behind networks, cells trained and equipped to resist occupation, to melt back into the population, and to strike if the Red Army ever arrived. In Italy, that shadow program acquired a name the public would learn decades later: Gladio. Officially a contingency of survival, the stay-behind effort lived in the gray zones where democracy met counterintelligence. Arms caches were hidden in basements, men received covert instruction, and lines of communication ran through intelligence services and, in some cases, NATO liaison channels. For years, the whole arrangement was a quiet secrecy, tolerated by governments and veiled in need-to-know silence. Then came the late 1960s and 1970s, an era historians now call the strategy of tension. Bombings, kidnappings, and assassinations convulsed Italy. The aim, critics and some participants would later allege, was not liberation, but manipulation, to create fear so public opinion would turn against radical left-wing movements and to justify repressive measures. The idea was brutal in its simplicity: provoke chaos, present the state as the only shield, and marginalize political forces that threatened the post-war alignment. Concrete events fed the suspicion. Piazza Fontana in December 1969 threw the country into crisis. An anarchist detainee, Giuseppe Pinelli, plunged to his death in a Milan police station under circumstances that provoked riots and durable scandal. A failed coup in 1970 led by right-wing officers, the shadowy lodge Propaganda II, exposed in the early 1980s, and the August 1980 bombing of Bologna Station that killed 85 people cemented a recurring, ugly pattern. Far-right militants were implicated time and again, while investigative threads traced back to intelligence networks, paramilitaries, and a mesh of clandestine contacts. What historians now chart as the conspiracy is not a neat single order issued from a single office, but a tangled architecture, officially sanctioned stay-behind units created for anti-Soviet defense, extremist groups willing to use terror, Secret Service officers who moved between those worlds, and political actors who sometimes preferred a fog of explanations to transparency. Evidence emerged: hidden arms depots, intercepted communications, membership lists that showed intersections between stay-behind structures and right-wing militants. At the same time, hard proof that NATO or the CIA directly ordered domestic bombings has not been conclusively established in open court. The scandal broke into daylight in 1990 when Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti acknowledged to Italy's parliament the existence of a secret parallel army. The admission triggered inquiries across Europe. Belgium, Switzerland, and other NATO countries found their own stay-behind caches. Parliamentary commissions probed ties between intelligence services and violent groups. NATO conceded the existence of such networks while rejecting allegations that it sanctioned criminal acts aimed at manipulating democratic politics. The aftermath was messy and incomplete. Trials over decades produced some convictions of terrorists linked to neo-fascist organizations. Other cases limped toward acquittal or remained unresolved. P2's exposure stripped back another layer of collusion between financial, political, and intelligence elites. Yet many questions remained. Who pulled strings in the dim corridors between protection and provocation? And to what extent were democratic institutions compromised by their own secret safeguards? This is the true-life story of a Europe that learned the hard way how the logic of extraordinary measures can metastasize. The stay-behind networks were born from a fear of foreign conquest. They came, in some instances, to be implicated in a domestic war for the hearts and minds of Italians. The revelations of the 1990s forced a continent to reckon with a simple, terrible lesson. When the state builds walls inside its own institutions, the shadows it casts can fall on the very people it meant to defend. Please don't forget to subscribe for more hidden history, true stories, and global mysteries.